making the effort to come listen to me, and I hope that I have enough to entertain you for 30 minutes or so. I've certainly enjoyed reliving my Truk Lagoon trip by going through all the photos, and it was really difficult to choose which images to use and also which wrecks to talk about, because there are just so many. So thank you to Karen for organizing this, and thanks for everyone for listening in. I'm going to start my screen. Recently, just before lockdown, I was fortunate enough to go to Truk Lagoon with some mates, and we had a great time. Certainly, without a doubt, the best wreck diving that I've done. There was so much to see, such great condition. So I'm going to tell you, I'm basically just going to share with you my experience and the trip that I had. I'm by no means a Truk Lagoon expert, but I just want to share some dives with you. We've all been in lockdown pretty much, and we haven't been doing much diving. So this is like a little virtual dive trip. As Karen said, I'm going to start off by talking about the Explorers Club. But first, I want you to look at your screen. What you're looking at is nothing. And without explorers that have gone somewhere first, without explorers that have taken images and brought back to us, we would have nothing to see. We wouldn't know what the Earth looks like from the moon, or what is in the deepest, furthest reaches of the cave system. So explorers are really important to mankind. We get to see the Earth like we've never seen before. And what the Explorers Club is just an embodiment of that spirit of exploration. They started in 1904. A bunch of guys, about 50 of them, top explorers from around the world, decided to meet and have a dinner. And during this dinner, they set up the Explorers Club. It gave them a platform to share of their experiences and to support each other and create a fellowship so that they could support each other with other endeavors. And at this dinner, this is where the Explorers Club was organized. They're based in New York, and even today, explorers from around the world can gather and share their experiences and tell their stories. The Explorers Club still hosts an annual dinner. It's the Explorers Club annual dinner, ECAD. Unfortunately, this year, because of COVID, the 116th annual dinner didn't take place, and it's been postponed until next year. You can see from this image here, the Explorers Club flag is carried by Explorers Club members from all over the world. In fact, out of the world. You'll see there's an image of Neil Armstrong's flag. There's a flag there from the Phoenician wreck exploration, which is a project I'm busy with the team in Malta. So anyone that is an Explorers Club member can apply to carry the flag, and the flags are numbered. And many of these flags have been in multiple expeditions around the world. So it's quite an honor. You may get a flag that's been to the bottom of the ocean, down to the Mariana Trench. And you get the opportunity to carry that flag on one of your expeditions. So I count myself lucky and humbled to be part of the Explorers Club, and the rest of the guys out there that have all presented in this series. previously are held in high regard around the world for their exploration and conservation efforts. So that's the Explorers Club. And if you want some more information, go to explorers.org and you can read up. You can see what's going on around the world in exploration. That's a bit of a mouthful. You can get feedback on projects that are happening around the world. So it's really interesting and quite an informative website with a lot of information. Cool. So let's jump right in. Where exactly is Truk Lagoon? Well, quite frankly, it's in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's now known as Truk Lagoon, and it's basically an island atoll, a small, tiny island atoll in the middle of Micronesia. There you can see an image of the atoll itself. You can see how well it's protected, and therefore why it was so popular as a retreat during the war. Wow. So this is quite simply the furthest I've ever been from my home. It was quite a journey to get there. It took a few days. Left Johannesburg, went up via Dubai and Singapore, Tokyo, and then down into the island hopper, heading towards Truk Lagoon. Total of 21,000 kilometers air miles. And but as far and as long as the journey was, it was worth every second that it took to get there. And why? Well, firstly, because it's so remote, because it's so far away, it makes it unspoiled. It's untouched. More people probably dive on the Thistlegorm in 1 month than, in fact, 1 week, than dive on the wrecks in Truk Lagoon in an entire year. Dive the number of people in are very limited. So it's unspoiled. The wrecks are absolutely pristine. I mean, almost, there's around 50 wrecks, ranging in depth from 10 meters up to 70 meters. So there's something for everybody. And believe me when I say that every wreck has something unique to offer. So really, from my point of view, it was a spectacular trip and one that I'm really grateful to that I had the opportunity to go on. So why are there so many wrecks there? I think, that's often the question. Well, if we go back in history, a bit of a history lesson here. Japan occupied Micronesia in 1914. And during World War II, Truk became a really central base for the Japanese army. In the Pacific, it was kind of in between the USA and obviously the whole eastern side of the Orient. So it was just a good strategic point to be for Japan. And because it was so well protected and the sea there is relatively calm, it's like a natural harbor. So it was a great place for the ships to be. But then, if you can imagine Pearl Harbor, America exacted the exact same devastation on the Japanese. And basically, they launched Operation Hailstone, which was a 2-day assault, which pretty much wiped out the merchant fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy. So it was devastating, and one of the things that laid into the Americans' favor was that on Truk Lagoon, the radar could not pick up low-flying airplanes. So it was a complete surprise when these planes started attacking, and they had no time to prepare. They couldn't do anything but run and hide. And for the most part, most people couldn't hide. They didn't have time to run away or to get anywhere. There were over 30 airstrikes of over 150 aircraft every hour for almost 2 days. So you can imagine just how the Japanese felt with this bombardment of planes and bombs and just complete chaos happening all around them. Over 250 airplanes were damaged and destroyed. And there's well in excess of 200,000 tons of shipwreck sitting in Truk Lagoon. And most of these ships were what we call merchant vessels. And a merchant vessel, or maru as it is known in Japan, is a really important part of a military's fleet, because without them, they wouldn't be able to transport people, they wouldn't be able to transport supplies. So all their ammunition, all their injured and wounded staff or troops couldn't get dealt with. So a merchant ship is a really important part. You can see by this image here of there's a few thousand bottles of sake over there. And I believe that that's the only reason they managed to survive 2 days, is because they just saw these planes coming and they went straight for the booze and enjoyed themselves. They enjoyed their last few hours on Earth. So over here, we talk about ship tonnage, and we talk about the gross tonnage of a ship. This is a list of some of the top wrecks in Truk Lagoon, and you can see some of these ships are in excess of 8,000 tons. So we're talking about really big ships, and that's kind of what makes it so exciting, is because you're getting to dive on really big chunks of metal that have got so much to offer. The first wreck I want to talk about is the Aikoko. Now, the Aikoko, as soon as it was finished in 1941, it was requisitioned by the Japanese Navy. They were kind of looking over the shipbuilder's shoulder when they built the ship, because there was very little for them to do to repurpose the Aikoko to make it a military ship. So I think they had other intentions in mind when the ship started getting built. It was early, or let's say mid-January 1944, the Aikoko, loaded with about 600 odd men with ammunition and supplies, started heading up towards Truk Lagoon. The fleet that they were in were attacked, and miraculously the Aikoko emerged undamaged from the attack, which happened about 500 nautical miles outside of Truk Lagoon. So anyway, it made its way up to Truk Lagoon, and it got there about on the 1st of February, where it was stationed and started to offload. On the first day of bombing, the Aikoko was hit by a bomb, which started a fire, but no serious damage. It was then hit another 3 times in the attack, and still nothing really too bad happened to it other than a fire on board. But in hold number 1 on this wreck was all of the ammunition. Well, not all of the ammunition, but it was filled with ammunition. And the bomb that exacted its final death blow, or torpedo that hit hold number 1. So there was a spectacular explosion, and it ripped off the bow section of this wreck. Here you can see an image of the explosion, and it's devastating. You can see the splashes of the wreck, bits of wreck debris splashing into the water all over it, all around the wreck site. After the explosion, it took 2 minutes for the Aikoko to sink. Unfortunately, there were over 900 lives that were sitting in the stern section and the crew section of the ship when it went down. So a massive loss of life. And in fact, even one of the airplanes that was flying over was hit, and the 3 crew members that were in that airplane were killed in the explosion. So it was a massive, devastating explosion. But you'd be surprised that there is still so much to see. Firstly, just to see where the wreck was sliced in half. I mean, it's almost like a butter knife cutting through the wreck. Just to see that is quite spectacular. To see the devastation that the bomb actually, laid into this thing with, just that on its own is something quite spectacular to see. But the stern section of the ship, because it went down so quickly, is still in great condition, and there's so much to see, in the hold at the back there. And one of the interesting things that you can see right at the back, if you look at the back of the ship at the stern section, there's one of the guns is pointed up at about 75 degrees. And you can tell that those guys were fighting for their lives until the moment they went down. So really an interesting wreck. It is quite a deep wreck. The bottom is sitting at 65 meters, but there is enough to see in the sort of 50-meter range, so that it's not too much of a hectic dive, but really is something quite spectacular to see. Here you can see an image of taken from the bow section towards the stern, and you can see how it's just completely just gone. It's just not there anymore. It's just half a ship. So really quite a spectacular image. To see that devastation, that metal is thick, and the way that it's just folded open and just gone is something quite spectacular. That's an image of the stern section. You can see one of the holds there. Other than the front of it not being there, it's still in great and a great wreck to die. The next wreck I want to talk about is the Heinerth. Now, the Heinerth was a 7-deck ocean liner from about the early 30s, and it was converted and requisitioned into the Navy in 1941, as most of these wrecks were. It is one of the larger wrecks, so it's 155 meters long. And you can imagine for an American fighter pilot or dive bomber flying over Truk Lagoon and seeing this mammoth vessel below you, it was certainly high on the list of targets. So the bombing was just relentless. They were just going after it. And it was early in the morning of the 18th of February. The Heinerth was trying to get away from the island. They'd been struck the day before, but the guys had managed to keep them afloat. They managed to offload the torpedoes. They had Type 95 torpedoes on board, which they offloaded. And they were trying to get away. And just after 3 a.m. in the morning, she was struck again by 2 pairs of bombs, and a fire engulfed the whole bridge. The ship started sinking, and the captain Tamaki, he said, "Okay, guys, abandon ship. Let's get off here." Most of the staff, the troops made it to shore, but about 18 men perished, unfortunately, on the wreck. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, torpedo bombers from the USS Bunker Hill came in and attacked this burning ship in the middle of the ocean, and it struck it on its port side, and the ship managed to come down to rest on its port side. And you can see here, it's lying on its side. still relatively intact. This wreck is great because it's relatively shallow. I think I spent 4 or 5 hours on this wreck, I think over 2 dives. And there was just so much to see. Everywhere you went, there's just something really interesting. But for me, the most interesting thing was in the starboard companionway, which is in the shallower section. There are loads of periscopes. So spare periscopes were carried on the ship. This ship was one of the ships that supported the submarine fleet. And it's really interesting to see these completely intact periscopes from top to bottom. And the interesting thing that I never knew about until I went to Truk Lagoon was the fact that there were 2 different types of periscopes. There's a search periscope and an attack periscope. The search periscope is a larger diameter. So as the submarine's cruising through the water, it creates a larger wake. So when they want to attack, they change to the attack periscope, which is a smaller diameter and creates less of a wake. So that was something really interesting for me. I never knew that before. Never even considered it really. And it's great to see these things just lying in the companionway as you're cruising along, and you take a good 30-minute swim through this companionway and you've got so much to see. Here's a friend of mine, Pam Wooten, from Florida, and she's swimming over some torpedoes that are inside the wreck. Here's Pam again and Aaron from the Third Dozen, looking at a first aid kit, which is still pretty much intact. It's still laid out there, and a number of wrecks have got these artifacts that are just everywhere, whether it's first aid kits or gas masks or boots or items of cutlery and crockery. They're still there, and I think that's what makes this diving so interesting, is that there's so much human interface still left lying about on these wrecks. So it's fun to see. The wrecks often have these large open spaces that you can swim through, which is great because it makes it easy to navigate. And because the wrecks are so big, there is all the space that you can swim through and enjoy and not feel like you are cramped in. Let's talk about the Fujikawa. Fujikawa was requisitioned into the Navy in 1940. She was one of the ships that was involved in the Midway battles. I know that some of you may know the Battle of Midway. There's recently a movie about it. And this was one of the ships that was involved in the Battle of Midway. The Fujikawa was damaged in a number of other battles and had been repaired and sent back into service. And it was in fact in Truk Lagoon having repairs done at the time of the attack. So she was hit repeatedly by bombers, and she finally sank on the 18th of February, early in the morning. She's probably one of the most popular dives in Truk Lagoon, certainly one of the most famous, definitely a must-do dive. And, I think that there's just so much to see. She's not particularly deep, so she's not too hectic. And there's still so much on the wreck to see. She was carrying lots of support and spares for the airplanes. So there are propeller blades and fuselages and shell casings and machine guns and gas masks, beer bottles, fuel drums. There's just so much to see. Every single hold you go into is just full of stuff to have a look at. So really is one of the most popular wrecks in Truk Lagoon. Here's a great shot by Jill Heinerth of the bow section. It's just amazing to see after the years how much life is growing on these wrecks. If you look at this bow section, it's just teeming with coral, hard and soft corals. Just amazing to see how the ocean is reclaiming its land and making human things home. This is the second hold of the Fujikawa. As you can see, nice big open spaces, easy to get into, easy to navigate, and really pretty. Now this is one of the most famous and probably most iconic images from Truk Lagoon. This is affectionately known as R2D2, and it might look like it's some sort of robot, but in fact, it's an air compressor. So nothing too futuristic about it. In fact, there's Futurama. That's the other show. I was thinking about trying to figure out the show earlier. Futurama. It's also, I think there's a character in Futurama that this reminds me of. But yeah, this is definitely one of the most iconic images. If you've seen a picture of Truk Lagoon, it's probably this one. This is the first hold of the Fujikawa, and here you can see you can see all the oil drums, and you can see the propeller blades lying scattered in the hold. So again, just a really great great artifacts and tokens of that time that you can, just a piece of history. Now, on many of the wrecks in Truk Lagoon, because they're still so intact, the masts and the crow's nests and the superstructures are all very much intact, and they often go really high, which is great, because when you're doing your decompression stops or when you're ascending to the surface, at least you've got something to look at on your way up. And this was a really interesting perspective from the top of the crow's nest down, and you can see the visibility was great in this. See guys down there. Those are recreationals swimming down there. So again, just testament to the fact that it's a dive that anybody can do.
Truk Lagoon, guys talking about.
So the next wreck we're going to talk about is the Shinkoko. The Shinkoko was a commercial tanker. Funnily enough, it was transporting oil between the USA and Japan. So quite funny that at the end of the day it gets bombed by the Americans. She arrived in Truk Lagoon just 3 days before the airstrike started on Operation Hailstone. And she was stationed on the northwest, I believe, of Fifen Island when she had a direct hit. And it opened up a huge hole in her engine room. Later that day, planes again from the Bunker Hill, the USS Bunker Hill, attacked her with 6 torpedoes, which all missed. And that's an interesting thing about the time, is that the American torpedoes in those days weren't very good, and certainly not as good as the Japanese. But nonetheless, she was eventually sunk the next morning, and another great dive. Again, also not particularly deep, a very easy dive to do, even at recreational levels. Tons of life on this wreck, a lot of hard and soft coral, really interesting to see. And there you can see the bow section again, a great image. And there, going through the engine rooms, super interesting dive, easy to get into. Although not all the wrecks in Truk Lagoon are easy to navigate and easy to swim around in. Here I'm going through one of the wrecks and I'm having to squeeze my way through, take my cylinders off and push them ahead so I can get through. But it's worth it. You get to some sections in the wrecks that are just spectacular, things that people probably don't see very often, lots of interesting artifacts. And one of the great wrecks was the Rio, built in 1930 as part of the Japanese, probably one of the largest Japanese cruise liner operators at that time, the OSK line. They had an excess of 20 motor-driven passenger ships, which is quite a number for that time and it could house around 1,100 passengers and probably 150 crew members. So it was a big ship, and again requisitioned by the Navy and used for the transportation of military supplies and personnel. She was bombed and sank on the 18th of February. Another one of my favorite wrecks. She lies on her side, and there's tons to see, interesting things to see, like this, for example, hundreds, if not thousands, of beer bottles stacked in crates up in one of the holes. Really quite an interesting image, and quite spectacular to see all of those bottles. Now, one of the sort of spine-chilling reminders of the war is, if you look at some of these instruments on some of these wrecks, you can see the clocks. And the clocks are basically like time capsules to say, well, this is when the wreck went down. So this is when so many people died. And for me, going through these wrecks, it really humanized the wrecks. And it made me think about their time and the devastation that they went through. And I think probably just in terms of war, how devastating war can be to all of those involved, whether they're on the field or at home. Here's an image in the engine room. Just again, you can just see the size and the scope of everything that you can see on these dives. One of the things that you can see on the Rio are these rifles. So something that you don't see often. You can see my light is shining on a trigger, and the rifles are laid up the side of the wreck. And finally, I want to talk to you about the San Francisco. Another passenger cargo ship built in the 1919, and she was bombed early, but she was only sank on the second day when she was hit by 6 500-pound bombs that were dropped from aircraft that came from the USS Essex. Only 5 crew were killed as a result of these attacks, but she is a spectacular wreck, an amazing wreck to dive. The bombs caused a lot of damage sort of midship, but what's interesting is all of the tanks and trucks that are on this ship. She is a bit of a deeper wreck, but nonetheless a great dive. Spent a long time on her. Really wish that I could have spent more time on her, just because of all the interesting cargo that she had. There you can see one of the trucks that are up there. This is a gun on the bow section of the ship. we had some photographers, Aaron and Jill were playing around with some lighting, and so they had lights stationed up underneath the gun and taking shots, and we kept on photobombing them. There's another image of that gun. As I mentioned, some of the cargo on the San Francisco are these tanks. So this is a Type 95 Hago light tank, and there's a few of those sitting on the decks of the wreck. So those are really interesting to see, and you can see by that image they're just in such good condition. They look like they're ready for action. So there's a Type 95 tank. Approximately 2,300 were made during the war. So it makes it Japan's sort of most produced vehicle for the war. So those are some of the wrecks that I dived. There are over 50 of them. So literally there's so much to see, whether it's airplanes or shipwrecks. You're just spoiled for choice. So it was really hard to put this together and choose specifically which wrecks to talk about. But I think that out of the handful that I chose, it gives a good indication of what someone would look forward to when they go to Truk Lagoon. And certainly I'm sure you'll agree that it has so much to offer the average diver, and particularly somebody that's into wrecks and into metal. So I just want to talk a bit about the boat that we were on, Truk Master. Here you can see we in the lounge, a nice comfortable lounge area where there was time to do the briefings and go through everyone's photographs. Also catch a little bit of a 40 winks after one of the dives, a really comfortable lounge, and loads of space on the deck to kit up. You can see some images there. Aaron from Dirty Dozen, and who's that? That's Chris, one of the divers that was. We were really fortunate enough to do a land excursion and go and visit one of the schools in Weno on the main island. Jill Heinerth was doing a presentation about exploration for the school, and we had the whole school there, and just were absolutely blown away by their humility and their eagerness for exploration. We were there for hours talking to these kids about diving and about exploration and about conservation. It was a really, really humbling experience to spend the day with them. They were phenomenal kids. I need to go back there and just visit them even would be enough for me. Here's the layout of the Truk Master. There are, it's enough space for about 16 people, 16 guests. So really well appointed and well suited for doing this kind of diving. They've got all the gas that you need. They kit it out for rebreathers or side mount divers or twin set divers, whatever it is that you need, they have it on board. At this point, I just want to say thank you to Aaron, Jill, and Martin from Truk Master. Thank you for the use of your images. I was going to use some of my own, but to be honest, put up against these guys' photos was just not a competition I was prepared to get into. So thank you guys for letting me use your images in this presentation. If you are interested in doing a trip to Truk Lagoon, these are some dates that are available through Dirty Dozen. You can pop over to their website and you'll see more information about the wrecks out there and more information about the trip. And you can send them a mail if you're keen to jump on board and do a dive with them. So yeah, that's it. Next week we have Richard Bonden coming and joining us. He'll be doing a great presentation for us on something I only found out about today, and I must be honest, I'm quite looking forward to it. So yeah, if I can hand over to Richard, he's going to introduce his talk. Thank you, guys.
Hey guys. Hey, first of all, PJ, that was an amazing talk. It's been a while since I've been to Truk Lagoon, and it was great just to hear the history back again and some amazing images on there. So great job from you there.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm super excited to do this presentation for you guys. Thanks a lot for giving me the chance to talk about it. Normally I'm talking about sporting aggregations and the stuff I do in Palau, which I'm going to mention briefly. But this is a brand new presentation for me. It was about an expedition that I did with Greenpeace to Mount Vima, which is a remote seamount in the South Atlantic. And it was just an absolutely amazing expedition. So I'm like really looking forward to talk about it. Got some nice slides on there. So hopefully you guys will tune in. And that's about it, really. I was actually like, I was actually caught a little bit short this morning because I was, getting ready to listen to your talk, and then Karen was like, "Are you ready to talk?" And I was like, "It's next week." I'm sitting here without my shirt on, drinking my coffee, and my heartbeat just raced up there. So yeah, it's definitely next week.
It's next week, yes, Richard. So we must say hi to you.
Oh, you certainly got me. Hey, what's up?
PJ, are you going to take some questions now?
Yeah, I'll
There's quite a few
yeah.
questions in the chat box. You want me to go through them? I think you've answered a lot of them. I'm trying to just find the ones that are more relevant. From Glenn, what is the water temperature and approximately how much does it cost from South Africa? And is there a dive shop on one of the islands in the atoll?
Okay. The cost to get there is dependent on your flight path and how you do your booking. But it'll cost you anywhere between 30 and 70,000 Rand to fly out there. Again, just depending on how you do your booking. But do some research and speak to some people before you book. What else? Is there a dive shop on the island? Yes, there is. There is a dive shop on the island. Truck stop. There is not too much of a retail dive store that you would expect to see maybe in a main town, or it is really the middle of nowhere. So you can't expect to have, walk into a dive shop and buy the latest Scuba Pro gear or the latest Apex regulator or whatever. It's limited. So you got to take whatever you need with you.
Yeah, and what is the water temperature?
Water temperature was around 27 degrees, somewhere around there. Yeah, nice and warm. We still dived in dry suits. Most of the dives were between 2 and 3 hours long, so you're in the water for a long time.
Okay, and then from Gideon, when is the best time to go? Is it seasonal?
I don't think there really is a best time. It's there are bookings throughout the year. It's pretty temperate, so I don't think that there's a really bad time to go.
And then Greg was just checking, are there consumables for open circuit and closed circuit? But I think you've answered that, so yes.
Yeah, obviously you let the guys know ahead of time what you need, and they make sure that they have it.
Okay, and then Gideon, is there a liveaboard option, or I'm assuming land-based operators?
Yeah, there are a couple of land-based operators, and there are 2 liveaboard options available. You've got the Truckmaster and the Odyssey. So there's not hundreds of dive centers and dive charters out there, so you are limited. you know, whether you go land-based or liverboard is really up to you. I find it really convenient being on the liverboard. You could just park on top of a shipwreck and dive right in and jump out and, you know, have a cup of coffee and have some lunch and then go diving again. Whereas the land-based diving, although cheaper, it's not as convenient and as easy to dive.
Okay, who is guarding these wrecks?
Well, the kind of the people there are, you know, it's a lot of, it means a lot to them that the wrecks are there. They receive a lot of tourist income from the wrecks, so they realize the importance of the wrecks. And the wrecks are for the most part war graves. You know, so many people died on many wrecks. So so certainly it's you know, they do remain untouched. There's a lot of respect for them.
Nice. From Tanya, how many vessels were destroyed and lives lost in World War II?
In World War II?
World War II in Truk Lagoon. Sorry, my phone started ringing.
In Truk Lagoon, there were in excess of 50 shipwrecks, over 250 airplanes. So quite a number of wreckages. In terms of lives lost, to be honest, I would be guessing if I told you offhand.
How come that all these guns, clocks and bottles have not been stolen yet? There's always another day.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess, again, it comes down to the fact that people respect the stuff. No doubt from time to time, there'll be people that will go down there and you know, do something disrespectful to the wrecks. But for the most part, there's a lot of respect for the wrecks and the livelihood that they bring in. So for them, and there's nothing that they can do with the stuff. You can't take anything out. If you had to take an artifact out of one of the wrecks, you'd be stopped at the airport. I mean, they search your bags and they make sure that you're not messing with their stuff.
Okay, and last question from Hein. Any big or unusual marine life?
Not really. We did see a couple of rays and a couple of sharks, but to be honest, most time on the wreck and navigating through the wrecks. One day we were really lucky enough to have dolphins on our deco stop. They hung with us for, I don't know, it seemed like forever. They were there for ages. They swam around us and around us. So that was quite a special moment.
Nice. So there's a lot of thank yous which I haven't read through. It's just there's too many, but everybody is very appreciative, PJ. Thank you so much for an amazing talk. And yes, I think Truk Lagoon also are going to be getting a lot of visitors from South Africa. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's definitely a bucket list trip.
All right. Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.
Yes,